Well, hello, America. I have decided that I needed to make a video. It is time. I have not actually made any videos for quite a while now, a number of months. Usually I make my videos about golf because I like golf so much. There's so many good things about golf. This is relevant to this video. And occasionally I make videos about politics, and I have not made videos about politics for a while. Because I've spent so much time, too much time, yet still somehow just about the right amount of time talking about the election, talking about the choice between the Democrats and Republicans, between liberals and conservatives, between cultures, multiculturalism and monoculturalism. Uh, some would call xenophobia, some would call uh, ethnic uniformity. And I keep thinking, all in all, in the end, that the reason I do this is not because it's such a great thing to do, per se, in terms of being efficient, in terms of maximizing my income, in terms of a lot of good things in life, but it does help me avoid a lot of bad things. I think one of the important things about YouTube is it's a good thing despite the bad parts, like a lot of life. In overall, in a good sense, and this is a dangerous train of thought, but I still think it's important to face this reality. Sometimes things in life have a lot of good things to them and a lot of bad things to them, but in the overall estimation, in the sum per se, okay? Just like a balance sheet for a company, just like your checkbook, anything else that involves money, sometimes you have to look at the fact that the end result is a positive thing and look at the overall um, situation as a positive thing as a result. But this logic can be very dangerous because then you start to weigh everything in terms of whether it's a positive thing for you or a negative thing, or whether in the end you profit from it or you lose. And that is an exceptionally dangerous thing. That's what I call, or a lot of people call it, I say just me, I'm going to take credit for myself. Um, that's what's called ends justifies the means logic. I think it is just as important, if not more so, to look at the individual elements in that sum. Some of them are in and of itself, or in and of themselves, worth doing. And it's important to look at these things that are worth doing, that are good things for society, and not just focus on the overall, what's the word I'm looking for, economy of it, okay? So to me, there's a really interesting dilemma going on here, okay? I'm a minority in the sense that I'm a multicultural product, let's put it that way, okay? I have spent most, if not all of my life, looking at the consequences thereof, okay? I basically speak to you as a product of American society and a product of the consequences of being a minority in American society. And a lot of what I say in terms of politics, in terms of golf, to me, it all ties together, okay? The difference between golf and life in general, in this sense, is that golf is a rare and I think incredibly precious opportunity to operate in a system where your success or failure is a matter of your personal choices and your personal capabilities. One of the things I love about sports that are not team sports, sports where they pretty much all depend on individuality, okay, is it shows the consequences of your decisions and your actions in the outcome of the game. You make the decision to do this and that and the other, and you see the benefits. The tie-in between reality and your outcome is exceptionally sharp, okay? Now, of course, there are certain things that happen in golf when you start to involve other people that also depend on other people, and that's kind of the consequences of having the real world. You're not the only person on the golf course. You're not the only person making decisions in golf. And yeah, there are times that are good and bad. But again, you still get to see the discrepancy between what happens when you are playing by yourself and other people get involved in your play. That's one of the great things about golf. Again, as long as you take care of your stuff when you're playing and everything works out fine, it's obvious to see what happens when other people involve themselves in your game. Okay? This is the important distinction between golf and life. In life, you don't have the whole world to yourself. You are often the victim or the beneficiary of the actions of others, and what you bring to the table is quantified and qualified in different ways depending on who's actually doing the evaluation. But in this case, when we talk about politics, when we talk about Trump and Biden and whatever, everybody's part of the game. Everybody's part of the game. And one of the things about social media is it gives you an opportunity to put input into this situation, but at a level that you can control. Because you don't have to listen to what I'm saying. You could go tape yourself to some other video and pay attention to whatever else other people are saying. But you also have the opportunity to respond to what you hear. Who says what to you or to anybody else or to society in general or whatever. And you can be happy at what you see and hear on the internet, or you can get mad about it, or you can do something very good in response, or you can do something very bad. And this world is a wonderful world in that sense that you have the opportunity to learn and to experience and to interact with other people, but you can make it a good experience or you can make it a bad experience depending on what kind of person you are. And I'll tell you this. I don't think that people really understand the consequences of what they say and do or think or whatever, and in a larger sense. And then there's people who think that they should be rewarded for what they think and do, and then there's people who don't mind that other people want to punish them for what they think and do, and there's people that have escaped punishment, there's people who have been rewarded, who have undeservedly been rewarded. And frankly, one of the things about the two-party system is that you only have two choices. There's, Democrats, Republicans. You don't have really any major choices other than not participating in the election, not voting. Just I'm not going to choose between these two options. I don't like either one of them. I don't like the idea of supporting either one of them. And I chose not to vote this year. I've never voted, to be honest, for a number of different reasons. Okay? The thing that I think is important to understand, though, is when you see a clear sign, like the star above Bethlehem, the night that Christ was born, you see a clear sign, you kind of need to look at that sign and see what that sign is really telling you. Sometimes the signs like that, of that kind of magnitude, will tell you a lot of things at a lot of different levels. Okay? Now, I have really kind of backed off this whole Trump thing because, in my opinion, it's important to realize that Trump's won the election, Trump's president of the United States, and this is dog. Who's this dog? This woman's dog, I know. She lives nearby. It's important to realize that people have hidden traits as much as they have the obvious traits. And we all make some kind of assumption about people based upon what we see. We all make some kind of assumption based upon what we want. We all make some kind of assumption based upon the opportunities that we have involved with these people and so forth and so on. And we eventually find out what these people are really like when we deal with them. It's like golf. Ultimately, you have to show your stuff. You can't hide the fact that you can't play. You can't hide the fact that you suck at putting or driving or chipping or whatever. Ultimately, everybody's faults ultimately come out at some point. It's just a matter of time. It may take, 5 years with one person versus 5 minutes with another person, or 5 decades with somebody else, but eventually the real nature of these people comes out. The more you interact with them, the more you get to know them, you will find out what they're really like. And a lot of that comes through the filter of who you are as a person. Yeah, absolutely. But there are times when there is just nothing but them that you're dealing with. Okay? And I saw this moment happen after this recent Black Hawk uh, air civil airline. I forgot what it was, Embraer or whatever it is, the exact plane. Um, the midair collision over or on the approach to Reagan National Airport in D.C., which happened a week after Trump was in office, right? All this kind of stuff that Trump is doing and really super busy stuff that he's doing, and it's got to be done really, quick stuff. It's really important things that he's got to do, and Trump's been planning to be president for months now, and he's got people on, make promises to you that I'm going to do this on day one of my presidency. The first thing I'm going to do. Obviously, couldn't everything he talked about could be the first thing he was going to do, but he could do a lot of it on the first day, right? So it's important for him to demonstrate his commitment to being a great president by doing 1,700 different things on the first day that he was president. So sure enough, tee the ball up high enough, and you're guaranteed to fail. You set expectations up so high that even if you do meet them, you're still going to be criticized ultimately for failing to take care of the one thing that was really important. The issues that are really important, but you don't care about as a person. That's the obvious failure that you're looking at if you put so many pressures on yourself, and you do so by making promises to people, hundreds of millions of people in the country, okay? You start looking at things that are important to you, you start doing things that are important to you, but then in the absence of your actions, you demonstrate what's not important to you, okay? If I'm carrying, if I make 100 promises to people, I take care of all of those promises, then what I don't even discuss doing is obviously not a priority for me. Okay? At least not right now, we'll do it at some later time, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you say we'll fix all the problems in the United States, and then you leave this glaring problem that you don't even address, honestly, much less fix, okay? When you tell people that you're going to solve all the problems in the United States, and instead of the United States being a crappy country and it was brought down to the lowest possible levels by Biden, and you keep saying that over and over and over, hundreds, thousands of times over 4 years plus since Obama all the way up to now, and then you don't take care of something that's right in your face, that you deal with on a regular basis, it just goes to show how much you really care about the people that you're dealing with now that you've got them in your pocket. Okay? This is one of the things about life that you will find out, and it is one of the most caustic realizations. What do people do once they think they have all of the concerns in their pocket and they think they've got everything under control? What happens then? That's when you see this real person who admittedly has worked pretty hard to get to a particular location in life where they've got their, most of their life under control and things like that. And they take a breather and stuff like that. Okay, now we've known Trump is a big golf fan. We've known that for a long time. Okay, he when he was president the first time, he set a record for basically the number of days playing golf during his presidency. Okay, so we knew that was going to happen. Everybody who knows Trump in any shape based on his first term in office knew that he was going to play golf. So he becomes the president on January 20th. The inauguration hasn't even happened yet. Okay, and he's signing all these forms and documentation. I don't know if he signed the executive orders after or before he officially became president, but at least on the 20th, he's president, right? So, rattles off 50 executive orders and other proclamations and other declarations and stuff like that, and basically just takes over the entire federal government, at least in terms of his ability as president to do so. Whether or not he had official constitutional authority to do that or not, he did it. Okay, do what you want first, deal with the consequences later. Donald Trump. Um, so ultimately, we have this crash in right in the over the water on the approach to runway 33 at 8:45 p.m. a weekday night, and they're calling Ronald Reagan one of the airport, the busiest airport in the country. That's what they're all talking about. Oh, it's the most busy airport, it's right in the heart of DC. So there's a lot of things going on involved with this crash. Okay, crash happens. I don't know how long it took to that night or the next morning. Trump has a conference, and he's at the White House, and he gets up on this podium, and he's like, first I'd like to spend a minute of moment of silence, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, we all saw what happened. Everybody with any heart probably looked at this, especially people who used to be DC residents and federal employees and involved with previous administrations and either current incoming people. Yeah, a lot of people watched it. Okay. It was on Fox News, it was on MSNBC, it was on CNN, it was on God knows every channel, probably every major media channel in the United States that had the opportunity to broadcast it live did so, and the ones who didn't had to. Of course, that's the first thing they do is analyze it and put it on their own channel, copies of Fox News and copies of MSNBC, whatever. And so there were a lot of people who looked at Trump and what he said and how he composed himself during his 15 minutes right there in front of the world. Wasn't all that impressive to me. His first thing he did was show some civility for Trump, some restraint. Then he went off on this rambling attack on liberals, Democrats, Biden, DEI, everything under the frickin' sun, and of course the FAA. He also had to attack the FAA and the NTSB, saying, "Oh, they'll tell us what happened within a year." No, they'll tell you what happens as soon as they find out what happens that people need to know. Then they'll have their interim report come out in a year, and then they'll have their final report come out in 2 years. Trump, of course, goes off half-cocked, not knowing what the hell he's talking about, because that's just Trump. Trump doesn't mind talking bullshit because he thinks that ultimately, in the end, people will put up with him or deal with him or whatever, because in the end, he'll profit. They'll profit from him. And that's one of the issues that's become a big problem right now in the DC area, at least, and certainly parts of the country, is do we win or lose by having Trump be president in the end? That's a question that's really coming up now, because Trump is screwing over a lot of people, but justifying it by saying in the end it's good for them. It'll be better for them. It'll be better for the country, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I want to say that a star rose out of this whole situation. The first week after the accident, every day there's been some release of some information from some government agent. Every government agent with his salt has weighed in on this tragedy. Okay. Every senator, every representative, every Trump administration appointee, every existing federal administrator that can. The president of the company that was the airline that ran the airline, leaders in the military, leaders in the civilian world, everybody and their mother has weighed in on this tragedy, and it's all been caught by the news. And I want to tell you, there's two stars that shine brightly above all of the other talkers in the story, in my opinion. The first was the White House press secretary, okay, who basically cut to the chase of this entire issue. When I saw this on Fox News. I saw this on YouTube from a YouTube channel that has basically put up a clip of Fox News showing the White House press secretary saying this. I didn't see this live on Fox. I just saw it through the 2 or 3 layers of media in a way. The first was her, and she said, when you're on a plane approaching an airport, What do you care about? Whether the plane lands safely. What do you pray for? I think she said. Whether the plane lands safely or whether the pilot is the right skin color. Now, why would anybody get on national television and say something like that? Unless they had a message in saying that. And this is where I think MAGA is just an incredible phenomenon. That they're able to be as racist as they possibly can be racist without actually being overt about it. But it's hard to hide the subtle racism. It's hard to hide the undercurrent of racism when you're a racist. That's what being a racist is you're racist even if you're not walking around calling people niggers and calling people spicks and chinks and packies and whatever. You're still a racist. And that has some serious significance, okay? Why would anybody in their right mind say that? Unless it's important to them. And you kind of understand, especially if you grow up a minority in this country, you kind of understand, yeah, there we go. Everything comes down to race in this country. And people want to deny this, and then they turn around and everything they say is about race. Everything they say is, it all they try not to be racist and end up being racist anyway because they can't help it. It's just who they are. Even though they don't want to be seen as racist, even though they don't want to be seen as some hillbilly redneck or some Georgia moonshiner who talks all about, niggers and this and niggers. And trust me, there's hardly anybody in the South and on the East Coast especially, or even in most of the country, who doesn't occasionally, let out a little bit of this and that and the other about blacks and Latinos and minorities and stuff. It's almost impossible to find anybody in this country who isn't a racist to some degree or another. And I just come right out and say it. Nikki Haley was talking about that the United States is not a racist country. It's like, you are a lying witch. Woman, if there's anything that unifies and describes everybody in the United States, is that they're racist, at least to some degree. And the reason is because racism is a form of generalization. If you take the word racist out of the equation, it's still generalization. It's still basically saying, I can look at you and I can determine things about you based on your appearance. And I can say, well, people like that tend to be X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, and E. And it isn't so much the fact that they are wrong about that. It's that they're largely right. For the most part, that's why generalizations are used, is because they are right in the most part, in the logical sense of the grouping. You take a sample of 100,000 people who look like this person, and you talk to them, get to know them, ask them questions, you'll find out that they are generally like the categories that you assign to them, the traits that you assign to them. If that was wrong, nobody would ever do it. Or if they did do it, they would do it because they don't care about being wrong. That, again, the ends of doing it justify the means. You're willing to suffer the immediate consequences because in the long term, it'll be beneficial for you. So the most obvious thing to me about racism is that a lot of people are actually quite content with being racist. They're quite happy with it. They don't suffer consequences of racism unless they're in a situation, they're racist in a situation where there is an immediate consequence, a negative consequence to them. I wouldn't want to walk through North Baltimore, for instance, acting like I love white people. In Baltimore, there's a freaking race, essentially a cold race war going on in Baltimore to this day. It's been going on for the past 400 years. You don't go through an area that's like all black and everything, and where there's a race war going on in an area, and talk about how much you love white people. It just is a good way to get your ass kicked, if not shot or worse. And so I think that people understand that when there is an immediate physical threat, they're smart enough not to do something to provoke that threat onto them unless they're really looking for a fight. But in general, and you take them away from that threat, and hey, niggers suck. They're always causing trouble. They're a lazy bunch of lazy bastards. There's all that stuff will come out. So I think that the difference is that MAGA has learned not to be so blatantly racist, and they're willing and able. They found their avenues to be racist that are safe for them to be racist, that are more or less justified for them to be racist that way. And that's the new racism that MAGA espouses. The fact that some blacks are members of MAGA doesn't change that. Trust me, blacks can be just as racist as anybody else, if not more. We don't think bad of racist blacks because they're still blacks. You still have the fact that they're not whites to deal with. So there's a lot of positive things going on about MAGA in the sense that it allows people to be more open about their true feelings about race without turning into a shouting match or a literal war. But at the same time, there's still elements of a shouting match and there's still elements of a war. There's no question about it. The pressure of magma and the movement of tectonic plates may be slow relative to the forces that are containing these pressures, but over time, these pressures do change our planet. The tectonic plates may move slowly, but over time, they generate enormous forces that do incredible damage. Earthquakes, 5.6, 6.7, 7.8, 9 point ever. At some point, those shifts do create incredible damage. In the same way, the pressure of racism in this country does do enormous damage in the long term because it keeps us from being objective about reality and our influence in the world. And I think that the increased tolerance of racism isn't a reason why MAGA became so popular, but I don't think that the popularity of MAGA increasing is a great thing because it is inherently racist. And I think that just in the long run, it's going to be a bad thing. So I think that one of the things that definitely affected the vote in 2024 was that a lot of minorities realized, hey, it's the same old shit, new day, a new version of the song, the words have been slightly changed, but now we're back to the same old bullshit that we had back in the 60s. And a lot of people in this country are old enough to understand that, but certainly understand racism. They don't have to be, people who were forced to ride in the back of the bus, but they definitely understand what being called bad people because they're black means, or bad people because they're Latino means. They understand what that means. Bad people because they're Asians means. You don't need to give people the entire racist treatment to affect them by being racist. And so the fact that Trump got up in front of all these people within 5 minutes of being on stage, he's going into this long thing of blaming it on DEI and blaming it on not having the best and the brightest people in these positions and all this kind of stuff. And everyone, I think, listened to him knew, said, dude, you're talking about the federal government. You're talking about the military. You are not going to have the best and the brightest people working as air traffic controllers in Washington, D.C., at Reagan National. You're not going to have the best and the brightest people working as helicopter pilots flying around the District of Columbia. The reason why there's supposedly so much concern about the continuity of government is because supposedly our best and brightest people are the ones in the choppers. That's why this whole scenario was tolerated in the first place. The fact that you've got passenger planes flying into the most popular airport in the country, and the fact that the most popular, most busiest airport in the country is 2 miles from the center of the District of Columbia, is a mile from the Pentagon, a mile from the White House, a couple of miles from Congress. That's why this whole situation has happened and been perpetuated in the first place. But I'll tell you this, just as a quick aside on this, if you look at where they had an accident, that's probably the most likely place they were going to have an accident. They may not have ever had any actual air collisions at Reagan before now, but if you were going to have one, That's exactly where it would be, right there at 300 feet above and 300 feet away from the end of runway 33. That was like just the perfect place to have a collision. You look at the traffic routes, and you've got the plane coming in from the southwest or southeast and then curving up to the northwest to land, and you've got this chopper coming down from the north, and it is following the path of the river. There's a part of it right there at East Potomac Park, just south of the 14th Street Bridge, okay, where it juts out into the water right there where the end of the runway is. I played golf on that course 100 times, and I see those planes, those choppers flying around there all the time during the day. At night, they fly out there, and you can just go down. People go down to the water just to watch the planes land at National. They go down to the Arlington Park there, just south of the Arlington Cemetery, and watch the planes land there at National, or take off there at National, because they either land coming down the river, or they take off going up the river, or it's one of the two. So it's a very good place to go there and just kind of hang out and sightsee, and people do it all the time. The thing about it is that it's just inconceivable that they could have a chopper come down right there in front of the beginning of 33 going north, and have planes landing there. They're going right through there. And it was just inevitable at some point there was going to be an accident there. Now, why that situation was allowed to develop is a different story. Why this accident particularly happened that night, a different story. What Trump did in response was plain, pure Trump, okay? It's just a reminder to, I think, the entire world that Trump is not a normal person, okay? Just unbelievable how he politicized this whole situation. On top of it, he was wrong. But the main thing I think that stands out in this whole situation, why would his press secretary find the need to just plant a freaking race bomb in the middle of this whole thing? Trying to defend Trump and what he did and what he said to the Democrats and the liberal press who were there at the press conference, and just ultimately just rip off the mask and say, what's wrong with being racist? and the issue is, she's trying not to be racist, but she is ultimately blatantly exposing her racist core. Why would you ask people what do they want when they're in a plane landing at an airport? To land safely, or to have the right color, to have the pilot be the right color? How would having the pilot be the right color ever enter that conversation unless you were a stone cold racist? Why would you ever think of that? Unless you were the kind of person who got on the plane, saw a pilot sitting down in the cockpit and went, oh, he's a black guy, oh, he's Latino, or it's a woman, and then flipped out because you think they don't know how to fly. They can't land safely. They can't land a plane safely because of the wrong gender, the wrong ethnic background. That's what a racist would do. That's exactly how they would react, unless they saw an elderly or 40-year-old, 50-year-old white guy in both seats. Both of the pilots of the plane were white. They wouldn't be able to relax. There'd be a word about the plane landing safely. That's exactly what racism is at its core, is a lack of faith in the capability to perform at least well, if not excellently, if they're not whites. That's what racism is ultimately all about. Now, there's the secondary effects coming down, and I certainly think if you go to Baltimore or you go to Northwest DC or any of these, there's significant parts of Washington DC, significant parts of Nova, where you will find this very seriously happen, where they don't want patrons, restaurants don't want patrons in their restaurant who are minorities. They don't want anyone coming into their into the area who isn't white, because there is the fallout of having other races say, well, we don't want to come here if there's going to be blacks here, or we don't want to come here if the hotel or the food staff is Latino and things like that, because they don't want to associate with minorities. They're going to these places largely because there are no minorities there. That's why you can go right down in D.C., right down on I Street behind the Capitol and find plenty of restaurants and bars right down there on 14th Street behind the Capitol building. There'll be plenty of people, plenty of restaurants and bars. The reason they go there is because there are almost no minorities there. That's why they go there. Wisconsin Avenue, DuPont Circle, Connecticut Avenue. A lot of the parts in Washington, D.C. are favored by white people because there are relatively few, if any, minorities in those areas. Um, Bethesda, Silver Spring to the west part of Silver Spring, a lot of these parts, these people are hardcore racist. And they're not necessarily racist because they're militant racist, but what they are genteel racist. They just don't want to associate with minorities. That simple. And so the problem is when you talk about liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans, you have to understand that there's two aspects. One of them is just not liking minorities. The other is wanting nothing to do with them. There's the genteel minority or racists will always say, we don't mind that there are black people in this country. We don't mind that there are Latinos doing things in this country, as long as they're in their place, as long as they stay to their place, everything's fine. Okay, and that part is sort of in between the Democrats and Republicans, because just because they're liberal Democrats doesn't mean they actually want to hang out with minorities either. It's a complicated situation, but how could you ever associate landing the plane safely with wanting the pilot to be the right skin color? Unless you don't think the pilot can land the plane safely if they have the wrong skin color. Unless they have the right skin color. So it was like funny how she was trying to fend off all this criticism of Trump for talking about DEI, but at the same time, she did so by taking the door that they were hiding, all these racists in MAGA have been hiding behind, and using it to fend off all of the Democrats and liberals that were asking her this question. I was like, yes, and this is exactly why that's an issue. This is exactly why that's the problem, right here. There are a lot of people in this country who don't think that somebody is competent at doing a job unless they have the right skin color. That's exactly the issue. So, to me, this is why I think there is this sudden surge in the last year or two to have everybody on the internet have their photograph in everything they do, on their resume, in their email, in their bank accounts. They now, security. But do you honestly think that hackers really give a hell about what that picture looks like? Do you think, you have your scam artists and stuff, but then scam artists are also exploiting racism. Do you think that they're not convincing people to trust them and make, give them money and loan them money and all this kind of stuff because they're not attractive white people? How do you think that they're convincing people to do that? They look like somebody who's a respectable, responsible person. If you're a racist, you have a problem looking at a white guy in a business suit, clean shaven, all this kind of stuff, and thinking that they're trustworthy, respectful people because white guys would never cheat you out of your money. And I'm like going, oh really? Oh really? So yeah, so like some of the biggest spies, thieves, criminals in American history were clean-cut white guys in business suits, or dapper casual attire or whatever. Do you honestly really believe that you are dealing with somebody who's going to be perfectly safe for you to deal with because they're white? People scam you all the time in this country. Donald Trump is a white guy. Sorry. He still tried to cheat on the presidential election in 2020. Do you think that having the proper skin color or the proper racial background is a sign of safety and effectiveness in this country? No, it isn't. Of course it's not. And that's why resumes and that's why honesty are important. That's why we do background checks. That's why people lying about their background is a problem. This is old school logic that's still carrying over into our new day and age because people are incredibly concerned with looks and appearances. Incredibly. Even more than their common sense tells them. Okay? A lot of people in this country have been, will be, and are right now being absolutely fucked over because of their racial prejudices. It's obvious. I mean, everybody knows that there's as much crime involved with the internet as there is money being made from it. Why, half the money being made from the internet is criminal. So Trump taking, Edward Snowden and bringing him back under his wing, taking a guy who started and ran Silk Road and made billions, was put in jail for 40 years or more for starting this entire scam, this dark web, whatever. Trump, of course, gives him a pardon. January 6th, Trump gives 1,000, 1,500 people a pardon, and then, of course, one of them has to be shot and killed by the police the next freaking day because he's having some kind of war with the police. It's a large issue, but rarely do you ever see such brilliant signs of what the actual truth is, as what that press secretary decided to say at the podium in the White House. There's one more. I want to say one more, okay? Is behind this thing, there have been a lot of video of the two aircraft crashing. A lot of video. There's been a whole lot of video. And pretty much, as much as the audio was important, the video is important because it's just like a video. You've got to actually have video content to go along with your audio. You can't just sit there and talk and talk. It's one of the reasons these podcasters are sitting up there in front of the mic, for 30 minutes is because what else are they going to do to have video? They've got video right there. Let's just show them. So it turns out today I read in the news that these two black guys were arrested and charged with computer trespass, accessing computers that they didn't have the authority to access. Let's put it that way. Because apparently what they did is they took the two best videos that anyone has ever seen so far of this accident. It may have been surveillance cameras in the area that they had access to the surveillance video, and they recorded it on their phones and sold it to CNN. Pretty sure CNN was involved with this. Much like the Snowden scenario, but I'm just going to say, okay. So sure enough, picture of one of the black guys, mugshot there, sitting right in the story. The other one, apparently, they didn't actually decide to publish his picture, or he hasn't had a mugshot taken yet. But when have you ever heard of anybody ever having a criminal charge come out of video of an accident? I've never heard of that. I've never in my life ever heard of anybody saying, oh, these guys got proprietary, protected, secret video from the surveillance system, copied it, and gave it to the media, the mass media. And again, Snowden. Oh, we're all under surveillance. Oh, the government doesn't want you to know about it. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but the point is, actual criminal charges coming out of this, instead of the government itself releasing that video. Now, there is a real conflict of interest there when we have people who get arrested and locked up, charged for releasing video of a public event because it was recorded by a surveillance system that the government didn't want to admit that it had. In its full revelation, its full openness of all the detail related to this accident. So of course they were lying. There was evidence that they didn't even admit to having, much less showing, while they're trying to tell you how they're being open about this investigation. They're totally not being open about this investigation. And eventually, and this is what I was saying about dishonesty and lying, eventually it comes out. It's just a question of when, who pays the price to get it out, but somebody's going to get it out. And this is exactly why Snowden right now is being hailed as a hero by Trump and the MAGA crowd, because he broke the law in 500 different ways, broke promises that government employees make on a regular basis, and did it anyway, and it got all this help from liberal media, which Trump, of course, attacks on an hourly basis, and they spirited him off to Russia. And, of course, being in Russia, again, he's not far off Trump's radar. So it's important to understand, I think, in all this, that a lot of times people will go a long way to try to cover up their true nature, but since it is their true nature, eventually it will come out in one way or another. And the question now is, will MAGA admit to its true nature or continue to hide behind efficiency and common sense? Okay? And who in their right mind says that they want to worry about efficiency when they hire 50,000 people to try to protect the borders of the United States and pay foreign countries to take back illegals and gang members and so forth, and then not spend money that Congress has allocated to be spent and just walk head straight into these extended battles between Congress and the presidency, and take time and effort and money and stuff and spend it all on Supreme Court litigation. And it just becomes more clear that one of the reasons why Trump was so eager to get this stuff done the first day he was president is because he was able to get a lot of things done that he knew were illegal, and he knew that Congress was going to fight about it. He knew he was going to have a war about it. And he's probably looking forward to having the next 6 months of him walking around while his lawyers are off in court litigating these things. And he's disrupted, life in general for much of the United States. But he's up there talking about DEI and common sense and liberal blah, Democrat blah. And he's just going to use the next 6 months as a campaign term to sit there and attack elements of the United States culture while his minions run off and do all this dirty work behind their backs. It's all illegal. It's all patently illegal. And it's almost like he's trying to get ahead of the inevitable fights that are going to come out this summer about MAGA and about the Democrats and liberalism. It's just another campaign term for him. But what I really want to know, okay, is when are the American people going to wake up and realize that trusting somebody with no respect for the law because he doesn't think it's good law, trusting somebody with no respect for the previous administration because he doesn't think the previous administration was a good administration, but violates the law on a regular basis, okay? And ultimately, it is a law, violates the law and the Constitution on a regular basis, and justifies it because he thinks it's bad law and bad policy, okay? Why would anybody respect his laws, his policy? If he disrespects the American system, why would anybody respect his system when he does the same thing? In my opinion, there's only one real answer for that. And if you've been listening to what I'm saying at all, you know what that answer is, okay? Because Trump thinks that because he's a white guy and he's a conservative, that what he's doing is a good thing. And because he's a white guy and a conservative, people will trust him that what he's doing is right. Even when it's blatantly against the law and blatantly against the Constitution and blatantly in violation of the way the American system of government works. They don't care because there were minorities involved with it before, and now they're not. Now it's all white guys doing it. So it's probably going to be better. I think that's 90% of his motivation right there. Is if he cares about the law, if he cares about the Constitution, and I don't know how the Constitution fits in this except for the Supreme Court. If he cares about any of that, okay, his argument for just rough riding over it has to be based upon the fact that it was done by liberals and minorities, and therefore it was a bad thing. There can't be any other reason to justify saying, you know what, we need to run America by running roughshod over American law and the American Constitution. What kind of common sense does it say to say we are going to run this country better if we just ignore everything about the law and the Constitution and do it our way? How does that make sense? That shows an absolute lack of respect for American history, except for the fact that white people started this country, except for those simple terms that they can reduce the argument to simple issues. Okay? We didn't have the Civil Rights Amendment until 1950 or 60 or whatever. So it was better before then. The country was screwed up after that. And we need to disregard everything that happened after that. And go back to the way we were doing things where we were doing things before then. As if those people, those white people running the country in 18 whatever, made bad decisions because they took blacks and minorities seriously. We're not going to take blacks and minorities seriously, and we're not going to let the country suffer as a result. It's the only reason I can see that they think that what they're doing makes any sense. Now take everything that I just said and realize that among the 35 odd executive orders that Trump signed his first day of presidency was destroying birthright citizenship. Okay? And if we elevate being in this country illegally to the level of a national security risk, at the least, at the level of a major crime, whether you call it a felony or a misdemeanor, whatever, that we've got to round up illegals in this country and deport them. Considering the fact that they're talking about a deal with El Salvador and some of these other Central American countries that have built these prisons to hold gang members in, and they're just like treated like cattle, literally. And they're negotiating a deal with the United States government, with Donald Trump's government, okay, the administration, to actually hold American citizens and illegals and any other criminal anywhere else in the world in their prisons, because the fees they would charge to do so would be a minor inconvenience for these other countries, and it would make the whole concept economically feasible. Okay, that says two things. One, they have a prison system that even they cannot afford to have. Okay, and eventually at some point they are going to need foreign investment and foreign contributions to their prison system that they've created in their country as a stopgap solution for being taken over by drug gangs and violent gangs and sex trafficking gangs or whatever. Okay, the only way that they have stopped that problem is to put these people in jail for life in the worst conditions possible. But they can't afford to do it. It's a situation, a solution that they have chosen that they cannot afford to do without foreign aid. Trump then cuts foreign aid by destroying the U.S. aid environment. What do you call it? The bureaucracy, right? Okay, shuts down the U.S. aid decisions, ultimately saying that nothing that we send money out for foreign aid is actually a good idea. Elon Musk takes over this whole system. Look at the whole bureaucracy and look at the whole situation we've got here. Got a guy who made his money off government grants in California for making EV vehicles, which are not economically sustainable. Okay, the only way that he was able to make money selling EV cars was because he got handouts from the state of California and from the federal government to do so. They promoted this technology, okay, for the economic and the sociological benefits, even though it's not economically or viable in a capitalistic manner. Otherwise, the whole world would have switched over to EV. At least every company would be selling some kind of EV vehicle. The only reason they sell them is because of the government benefits, the tax cuts, the reduction of fees for usage of the roads, for producing these energy storage systems, for producing these battery systems, for making things which are not cars, that run on gasoline or diesel fuel, and they're just not viable. And everyone knows this. And 90% of the capitalists in this country ran against EVs and wind farms and solar farms and all this kind of stuff, and because they just weren't economically viable. No, the one guy who, other than bicycles and everything, has made this actually work for cars, okay, still flouts the safety regulations and having this autonomous vehicle software in his cars, which is not actually good, has killed people left, right, front, and center around this country for years now. He's still getting away with it, okay? He now is in charge of the Bureau of Efficiency in this country, right? How does that make sense? How does that actually make sense? The only reason he's doing it is because Trump wants to take the government's authority under Congress and the Supreme Court away from Congress and the Supreme Court, created this quasi-government agency to run the country that is now sitting on top of every dime the government spends and going, nope, nope, you don't deserve that. No, no, you don't deserve that. No, no, you don't deserve that. And Trump and Elon Musk have cooperated to basically shut down USAID altogether, whose job is simply to dole money out around the world to forward United States interests. That's their only job, right, in the government. Spend government money and buy people's affection and control the people through fiscal means, which is exactly what the IRS does, exactly what state governments have been doing for decades, is controlling people by controlling their taxes, controlling their fees. Immediately hits our nearest neighbors for tariffs to get them to pay us to protect the United States. Mexico will pay for it. Well, we figured out a way to get Mexico to pay for it. Now we ask. Except that the first thing that they did was charge tariffs back on the United States to balance out the tariffs that Trump charged on them. So now we're paying, again, these countries to protect us in the form of higher fees. It's not the government that's paying for it because we have our Elon Musk friend out there cutting our expenditures, but that doesn't mean that we're cutting our taxes. There's two different, taxes are one thing, government spending is another thing, totally different thing. So it looks like now they're still going to charge us taxes, but they're going to cut our spending that we're getting in compensation for the taxes we're paying. So what are we looking at now? Another 4 years of high taxes, or at least moderately high taxes, but no government spending? Is that what we're looking at in the future? I don't think that's going to happen either. I think somebody's going to get government money, and it'll be the Chinese, which is why they're only paying 10% tariffs. After all the raging and ranting that Trump has done about the Chinese, ultimately he's going to give them a 75% break on the tariffs that they're paying relative to Canada and Mexico. And one can only say that that has to happen because maybe our real competitors in our economics in the North America are Canadians and Mexicans. Maybe they're not actually our partners, they're actually competitors. Trump says they're partners. His actions say that they're competitors. Canadians have no real desire to come to the United States if they're not already here. Mexicans have been trying to get to the United States for 100 years, if not more. And they're constantly being rejected because they're Mexicans. That's why they're not being allowed in the country, because they're South Americans. Because, yes, there's a policy to let these people in as long as they don't overstay their visas and don't commit crimes in the United States. But once they do, then we ban the entire country from being able to get visas and come to the United States. What a surprise if you let 100 people in 1 year at a time, 1 year, one person at a time, and say the 5th year, the 6th year, the 10th year, the 20th year, one of them commits a crime, and then you ban the rest of them after that they're going to complain about being banned. And they're actually exploiting the lack of border protections and the economic lack of opportunity, south of San Diego, south of Texas, south of Brownsville, which has caused American companies to go to these areas for people who are willing to work jobs that nobody really wants to do for low wages that nobody wants to take. What a surprise that actually works out economically, as we have a match between supply and demand. And now we have, as a result, we have the federal government run by Donald Trump basically looking at one of the major fundamental constitutional amendments in this country in the past 185 years and saying, no, that's not true. We don't like it. Because it gives these Latinos an opportunity to become American citizens. We don't like it, so I'm going to write an executive order saying it's not true. His first day in office. What do you think these people's priorities really are? Meritocracy or keeping this country safe for white people? Honestly, you don't have a choice, okay? The whole problem with any kind of question, ultimately, is you either are objective or you're not objective. So to get back to the whole golf analogy and why this is actually super important, probably the most critical and important thing here, is that you can't have anybody talking about a meritocracy or any value, any kind of criteria or system or term of value, if you have no input into the observations, the methodology of gathering data, the analysis of the data, and the outcome. And if you can talk about being as scientific as you want to be, okay? As long as you put terms out there by which a system is evaluated, you put concrete terms into place, and a racist gets involved in the analysis of the system, they can use those terms against equality, against a multicultural society, as long as they're the ones who choose the system, choose the rules, choose the data, choose the evaluative criteria, and choose the outcome. If they are the people in power, they are perfectly positioned to be racist about each and every step along the way, and the outcome, of course, will come out racist. Of course it will, which is why we have for so long said that we can't have people who are racist in those positions. Now they're using the fact that we are taking the fact that they're white and stopping them from being in those positions to say that we are racist. Okay? And of course, that is leaving out the fact that they're racist in their complaint. If they were honest and said, oh, you're also not letting us run the country or voting against us because we're racist. If they were honest and said that, it'd be a different story. But of course, they're not saying that because they're not honest and they're racist and unable to accept the fact that they're racist. I think the hardest thing that we have to deal with in this country is to be objective in a situation where people refuse to be objective. There are going to be people who are racist against whites just as there are people who are racist against blacks, but there are also going to be white people who are racist against the fact that they were not selected in these evaluations, just as there are blacks who are going to be racist about the fact that they're not selected. There's the toughest thing about dealing with racism is it's just everywhere. And it's super, super hard to come up with a system that isn't racist. Okay? I can tell you this for a fact, hitting a fucking golf ball around a golf course for 18 holes in 4 hours is not about racism, except for the fact that you have people interfering with people who are playing because they know that racism is going to be on their side. If you've got white kids or white people living in houses around the golf course, they figure they can be as obnoxious as they want to be because they're white. They can get away with it. Same thing with black kids. The black kids are walking around walking around a course or living in a course. They can get out there and fuck with people playing in the course because they're going to go, well, this is getting back at you for being a white racist fucking motherfucker, and justify doing it. And ultimately, what we find out when we play golf is that a lot of what happens in the world is involved with one person hitting the balls around the course, and with other people who are not playing interfering with the game. Okay? There's a clear distinction between those two things. Just as when the guy playing the game is shelling people's houses, knocking balls into their backyards and trespassing in their property and stuff and taking the ball, it's the same thing when somebody who's not playing the course is playing loud music around the course, is talking and having parties and whatever. and distracting people playing. And there's a clear boundary between those two things. In life, it is very, very difficult to separate racism and emotion and inobjectivity, subjectivity from objective fact, because people who are subjective and people who are racist and biased can always pretend to be objective and always pretend to talk about facts. They can take the very criteria which is scientifically determined, evolved through a scientific system, evolved through over generations and generations of scientific analysis, and be racist with it. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. And that's exactly what MAGA has done. MAGA has learned how to beat science at its own game through decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years of criticizing science. They can do the same damn thing with any kind of socio-ethic analysis. They can be just as racist in doing it, because it's not hard. You just have to do it. It's all it takes is the willingness to be a racist in order to succeed at being racist. That's all it takes. If minorities and Democrats have to physically threaten the public to stop them from being racist, you've already lost the battle, because you're playing by their rules.